So, getting to oaks. We've been working on looking at oaks for urban areas for many, many years. And this is Quercus muhlenbergii in Ithaca, New York, in very restricted growing spaces. This is a great tree for alkaline soils, loves high alkaline soils. And we have a lot of alkaline soils in urban areas because of the leachate from sidewalks and building materials that we often find there. So we thought for many years, in fact, this is going back 25 years, that we thought we really like to propagate oaks clonally because there's so much variation there, there's so much provenance difference, ecological difference. We know that we could actually find perhaps better oaks within a species, that we've all been talking about variation within the species, then we know that there are very big differences within species that if we could propagate clonally, we might be able to capture some of that for more stressful sites. So I'm going to go over the first propagation work that we did, and this has taken many, many years. Here we see some upside down foil-covered pots. We basically use 3 techniques to get oaks to root in a more traditional way, where we first cut off the seedlings or the trees that we have almost down to the ground. So we're going to be using shoots from the juvenile part of that stump. That's actually key. You have to use juvenile material, and not just juvenile in terms of non-flowering, the classical definition of juvenility, but juvenility at the base of that non-flowering shoot. So there's a climb even from 30 centimeters to a meter to 5 centimeters in terms of the effect of juvenility along a stem. So it's not just the classical definition, there's actually a real difference between the top and bottom of that juvenile stem. So here we have cut off stumps covered with foil-covered pots just as they're coming out of dormancy. And we get etiolated juvenile shoots. Etiolation is also a very powerful technique to increase rooting in these shoots that come off of the juvenile part of the stem. Second thing we do, here we have lots of juvenile shoots coming off of those etiolated shoots coming off of that very small stump. And again, we've done research to show that even if you're a foot above that and take shoots from there, your rooting goes down precipitously. So we need to stay at that base. Then we use indole butyric acid, a rooting hormone at very high concentrations, typically 8,000 parts per million, in ethanol to paint the bases of those juvenile etiolated shoots with our paintbrush, as you see there. And then we cover the juvenile shoots with a collar or a bottomless pot, put potting medium, basically lightweight peat-based medium in the pot, and then cover it with shade, otherwise known as a mesh garbage can, to allow these shoots to acclimate to light over the period of a week or so, and they acclimate quite readily. This came to me in a dream, by the way. I bought off all the mesh garbage cans I could find in Ithaca. Anyway, it works very well. So there you see the shoots coming out of the bottomless pot. There's media there, which we keep moist as best we can, and the shoots have greened up, and now we take the mesh garbage can off, and they start to grow. So this is unfortunately, after several months, if you're lucky, you get rooting at the base of these shoots on the stump, and if you're even luckier, you get root systems like this, which we could then pot up and grow on. You don't always get root systems like that, but even if we have one root, we can baby it and it will actually start to grow. So that's where we come in 15 years, but we've gone further than that. So I'll show you some of the interesting things we've been doing. So we decided to do hybrid crosses, okay? Yes, there's possibly lots of selection potential out there for clonal propagation of different provenances and ecotypes and variation within the field. But we had the ability in 2004 to 2006 to make purposeful crosses in the white oak group, looking particularly for alkaline tolerance which is an issue for urban areas. And then we'd like to look at other features as well, and drought tolerance is another one. So we had over 40 different species involved. Maternal parents trees on Cornell campus. This was at Cornell Plantations, the Arboretum of Cornell University. There were many mother trees we found there, and we got pollen sent from Arboreta and collectors from all over the country. So we had these 5 or 6 mother trees on the Cornell campus, and then we got white oak pollen from many different species sent to us, and we made these purposeful crosses over these 3 years. We ended up with 350 unique genotypes, acorns, which we then planted out, and we're looking at the growth and then propagation and selection. So here they are in the field. These are propagating those unique hybrids. Each one of these is a unique genotype, propagating them. We did lose a few early on when we first started planting out. We expected to, because we had some of our pollen parents came from very southern regions, and we were crossing them with northerly adapted plants, but we lost very few of those 350, and we ended up with still many hundreds of hybrid genotypes. So here are the maternal parents. We had these at the Cornell campus, and so we decided there are many reasons why we wanted to work with white oaks. They have some really great characteristics from a urban tree standpoint, and we knew we could actually propagate quite a few of them. The biggest group we had here, the bicolor macrocarpa, were the most we had, and uhlenbergia, we had quite a few, and we also had the Quercus XQuery, the putative cross between Rober and bicolor, which is out in the trade now. We also had a putative gambili and macrocarpa cross, which was one of the mother plant, and a Quercus udi, which is perhaps a Rober macrocarpa uhlenbergii cross. We're not sure exactly what it is, but it was there, and we used it as a mother plant as well. And interestingly, it was a good idea. So these are the mother plants. And we had some indication if they're possibly tolerant to alkaline soils or not. We know bicolor can be a problem in terms of alkalinity. It can show chlorosis. And bicolor is one of the great plants for urban areas, tolerating wet and dry soils, and easy to transplant, and has a lot of great characteristics, but it has a fatal flaw in terms of its alkaline tolerance. So we really wanted to look at bicolor, as well as other trees that we had. This is actually Quercus XQuery. This is the Regal Prince trademark, XQuery long, which is in the trade. It's one of the few cultivars of hybrid cultivars that can be grafted successfully on a straight Rober seedling. And it's a great tree. It really shows intermediate characteristics between bicolor and Rober, and it is out there in the trade and very successful. This was one of our mother plants. Pollen parents, let's see. Lots of these here. So these are pollen we got from all over the country. Some from Arboreta, some from collectors. A few I just mentioned that ended up being important. Quercus comptoniae. Comptoniae is a cross between Lyrata and virginiana. That became important. Of course, we had some uhlenbergia, which we went back on other uhlenbergia and other plants. It was important. This is this is not a white oak. A Phoenix, we had that. We did it. I'm not sure if it. Anyway, it's there. Figure that one out. Fusiformis, Texas live oak, was an important pollen parent. Gambili, also important in terms of what came out of this. Also came back to Warei long as well as another pollen parent. And even more, Lyrata ended up being important. Rugosa, we had some really, and Turban Ella. So these ended up being important pollen parents, which we'll see in a minute in terms of the hybrids that they produce and what we actually came out of it in terms of alkaline tolerance. First we had to see, can we propagate these things? I mean, I just showed you the perfect propagation using the method, the cutback, etiolation, IBA method, and I showed you a great example. Well, not all of them do it, right? Because there's so much genotypic variation in terms of propagability. But we got these. This is female parent, male parent. These are ones that had the best propagation percentages. Number of rooted shoots. Notice this. This is an important feature in this talk. So really, really high percentage, 67%. We had 7 or 8 rooted shoots. This becomes an issue later on. Even in really good ones, here is Regal Prince times Comptonier, 4.5 shoots per plant. And these were each unique genotypes. And if we're going to try to get these plants out into the nursery industry, we've got to do better than that. Okay? 4 plants a year. Not great. We finally amassed enough clonal material from as many of the plants we could root, and we tested it for alkalinity tolerance. This was a very successful project, and I'm going to mention that my 2 graduate students, former and present graduate students, are in this room, and if I have to leave, I'll have to leave after lunch to go back to Ithaca to teach, they're here, and you should talk to them. Miles Schwartz-Sachs and Brian Dennig. This is Brian's project, screening those clones for alkalinity tolerance. We had them in pH 6 soil and pH 8 soil. pH 8 is not unusual when you're dealing with urban environments. And we were looking at which ones could take up iron under these conditions. So we were looking using a SPAD meter. It looks at basically correlation with chlorophyll. And you can see that the SPAD gives us a number, very whitish leaves, about less than 10. Still chlorotic here, 10 to 20, 20 to 30, a bit more green. And we're looking for over 30 to be successful in terms of the greenness that you need for a working tree. So we had all these numbers that we could predict and test these many different clones on their ability to take up iron in alkaline conditions. Oh, by the way, we knew it was iron we were dealing with because this is a chlorotic oak here, and within less than 7 days, using a chelated form of iron called EDDHA, which is Sprint 138 in a commercial, within less than 7 days, it greened up that way. Okay, we're going fast, 5 minutes. Okay. So the most alkaline tolerant species, we had quite a few here, which we said, well, this is great. We've got maybe out of the 300 or so plants we tried to propagate, maybe 25 were the really good ones in terms of their alkalinity tolerance. Here's some of them. And we also had to have rootability and alkalinity tolerance. So here's some particularly good. Here's that Udi, that strange Udi times fusiformis, made a nice plant, good SPAD, 42, which is way above 30. And here's a Warei long, open pollinated, almost 40, and macrocarpa times gambili, about 42. These are high, and these are in pH 8 soil. So that's really critical to be able to know this. Average number of shoots, 5, 5, 5. Okay, so quickly. Whoops, let's go back. So we had to go a different route. Yes, we could propagate these things clonally with cut back stumps, but we needed to get more plants if we're going to get this into the nursery industry and start testing on a larger scale. So we started tissue culture work a little over a year ago. Both Brian and Miles have been working on this, and here you see the X plants cut from the shoots of oaks. We get them in culture. We start to get bud swelling here. What we like to see in the multiplication is that bud to grow out here. And then we take that shoot off, cut off the leaves, put it sideways in our medium, and to get those buds to break, preferentially on all sides, not just at the terminal. And if we're really lucky, we get this. Ooh, yeah, I think this is like gold, you know. Again, and so we get lots of shoots growing, coming from those horizontal shoots, and we take that, put it into a rooting media, which has some auxin, and then voila. So again, this is what we like to see. It doesn't work for all genotypes yet. We're working on this. We've worked with people who are doing chestnut tissue culture, and because it's quite highly related to quercus, and we're actually looking at various different media and formulations to get this to work. One of the things we found recently, these are some new little explants in tubes have been sitting there for 4 weeks, not doing anything. Yet here, if you can really pin your eyes here, you can see the shoots growing out here. This is 1 week with GA, gibberellic acid, really does push those buds, and we are thinking that's a very successful model, which will be increasing our number of shoots that we can then multiply. A few plants I can show you. Here's some of our hybrids. This is Werii times Contoniae. Lots of, same cross, different kids, right? So we have the same cross, but lots of different acorns. They all show different results. Here's a quite open canopy. Here's a tighter one. Here's a really narrow one. So we get all kinds of unusual forms. There's a Macrocarpa gambalii times lyrata. Some really beautiful leaves here, very clean. This one I like a lot. Macrocarpa times Turban Ella. This is Sonoran scrub oak Turban Ella. Look at that. I mean, that came off a Macrocarpa tree. Those leaves are about yay big. Yeah, so this is a quite alkaline tolerant. Uhlenbergia fusiformis. This one we have not got to root yet, but it has one of the cleanest foliage in a very high disease pressure situation. So this is Uhlenbergia virginiana, which we are very excited about trying to get this to root. Uhlenbergia lyrata. And some of the things we're finding that are very interesting, we're getting acorns on 3-year-old trees, 3-year-old from rooted stump sprouts. Not all, but not just one. We've got quite a few acorns coming on these, and that's kind of unusual. We didn't expect to see that. Also, we have trees growing in tubes in the Clonal plantations, our Arboretum. So against the deer pressure we have there, this is not fenced. So we are actually growing these in pH 8 soil in some really difficult situations. And these are doing quite well as we have large field trials of these. We've got disease pressure. Obviously, we're looking at powdery mildew. And these are galls. These are insect galls. They're not acorns. So they are, we're looking at to try to see which ones have the cleanest foliage and the least disease susceptibility. Fall color as well. We've been seeing differences in form, fall color, disease susceptibility, and we will be looking more at drought tolerance along with our alkalinity tolerance. Looking at, just as Matt talked about this morning, low turgor loss point, using the same vapor pressure osmometer to see if some of these oaks can really pull up into a high osmotic potential to reduce their turgor loss point. So that's the future directions. First, we have to really work on our micropropagation and get all of our really desirable new hybrids into propagation. We want to look for growth rate and form, fall color, drought and flood tolerance, and disease resistance. And here you can see 2 hive sibling oaks, very different forms. Interesting. This is something we need to look at for the nursery industry, and we're going to have quite a few years ahead of us to solve this problem. So thank you very much.